Hello and welcome to the watch release recap for the week of June 17th to June 24th. Let's begin with Rado and their skeletonized DiaStar original release. Now, the reason why I wanted to highlight this watch is because in my opinion, Rado as a brand is sort of underrated and they deserve more attention. I understand this watch might not be everyone's cup of tea. The design of it is kind of out of the box. It has a conservative diameter of about 38 millimeters, 45 millimeters from one leg to another, and about 12 millimeters thickness, which makes it sort of a good everyday watch, or you could even wear it as a dress watch. It also has 100 meters of water resistance. It's powered by the caliber R808, which is an ETA-based movement. It has 80 hours of power reserve. It's essentially the Powermatic 80 with slight modifications and a skeletonized look. In terms of skeletonized watches, they're not my favorite, but I think this one here, if you're into this look, if you're into Rado, is a pretty good addition. I personally wouldn't buy one right away. I would wait few months to a year, and I'm pretty certain we're gonna start seeing these watches pop up on websites like Jama Shop or Ashford for half the price, maybe even less, because Rado is notorious for having these ginormous sales. It's not a very popular brand, so if you like these watches, you're in luck because you'll be able to pick them up at a great discount. The next release is IWC Big Pilot's Watch Perpetual Calendar Top Gun Lake Tahoe edition. Lake Tahoe basically refers to the case itself. It's made out of white ceramic. And of course, the Big Pilot Perpetual Calendar is self-explanatory. It has a perpetual calendar movement, which is very impressive. You don't need to adjust this movement, this watch, until the year 2100, I believe. So for the next, 77 years, you don't have to do anything. As long as you wear the watch, it will keep the perfect day and date. And it even has phases of the moon. It's a very complicated watch. To tell you the truth, I was never really into IWC watches. I guess I'm not that big into aviation, so they didn't really interest me, and that's why I really never highlighted too many IWC watches on this YouTube channel. Now I'm trying to kind of expand and highlight some of the watches that maybe I don't necessarily find interesting, but some of you guys will find interesting. The biggest negative of this watch is that there is a watch that is very similar. It's called the Mojave Desert, and it's actually the same price, but I think the look of it is more attractive than this white ceramic case look. It has this sort of sandy look, which I personally find more attractive. And this watch here costs $40,000 US. That's another negative for a watch like this. Yes, it's super complicated. Yes, it comes from IWC, which is a very well-respected brand, but I can imagine much better ways to spend 40 grand. You can buy a couple of really nice watches and still have $20,000 to spend on other things. Besides the high price tag, these watches are also not for everyone's wrist. I believe the diameter of this watch is about 46 millimeters and it has almost no bezel. When watches have almost no bezel, they're entirely dial. They look even larger. If you were to try one of these watches on, you'd be surprised how large it actually looks. It's also about 15.5 millimeters thick, so by no means is this a thin watch. I mean, of course it has a lot of complications, so it has to be on the thicker side. I think these type of watches are for a very specific buyer, which I'm not personally, but maybe leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know if this is the type of watch that you are interested in. Moving on to G-Shock, and this is actually a watch that I can afford. G-Shock is celebrating their 40th anniversary. That's right, they were founded in 1983, and there are quite a few cool releases from G-Shock. Actually, when I made my video last week, I forgot to include one of the coolest releases from G-Shock in a while. They're all blackout edition, which I quite like. I think they look really sick, especially this square face one. People for years have been trying to black out all the white writing on the G-Shock to make it look more stealthy, and here you go, G-Shock themselves blacked it all out. Essentially, it's a cosmetic change to their already existing line. They released 4 different models in this blackout edition. Moving 1 week forward to this week, and now they released an all-white or this see-through collection. Now this one is a larger collection. It includes 7 watches. And again, they're all existing models, just done in a see-through case. Some of these watches are the same model twice, just in 2 different sizes, sort of his and hers, which is, again, a good idea because I think this sort of see-through collection will appeal more to women. So it makes sense to include his and hers sizes. One of the cool parts about this specific collection is that not only the case is see-through and the strap is see-through, but also the display itself is sort of see-through. It's sort of transparent, so you can see the microchip behind the display. I think it's a very cool, unique look. I personally am not a huge G-Shock guy. I have a couple of G-Shocks. I wear them all the time, but I'm not specifically collecting G-Shocks like some people do, and some people are actually experts with these watches. They collect every release and they know all the little differences between G-Shocks. I'm not one of those people, but I know that if I wear, I'd be really excited about both of these collections, the blackout and the see-through collection. And also prices for them are sort of reasonable. They are around the retail price of the regular model. Maybe a slight premium is added on, but nothing crazy. So if you're looking for a new G-Shock and you like these looks, I would definitely buy one of these. Out of the two, between the see-through and the blackout, I prefer the blackout, but hey, that's just my preference. Leave your preference in a comment section below. Moving on to Timex and their new 1972 reissue of World Time. Timex has been making news lately, and they've been getting a lot of good buzz from watch collectors. I think they've been doing some smart things with their reissues and sort of giving watch collectors and watch community what they want. This 1972 re-release looks really awesome. I gotta admit, I quite like it. It's not a perfect watch, of course, because it has a lot of negatives, which I'm gonna address in a second, but just aesthetically speaking, I find it quite attractive. I like these 1970s designs. If you watched last week's video, I talked about the reissue of Seiko, and they had this limited edition from Seiko 5 that also looked very 70s. This watch here looks very similar to that, and just, I really dig that style. So these World Timer watches, they're not exactly GMT, they're the poor man's GMT. They don't have the third hand. What they do have is this sort of bi-directional bezel with different cities all around, which you would turn and figure out time in different time zones in different cities. The problem is, from my understanding, is that they copied this bezel exactly from the 1972 model, but since then the time zones have shifted according to the international standards. So now this bezel is not exactly accurate or useful. To be honest, who's buying a $200 Timex and then actually is figuring out all the time zones using the bezel? It's more of a gimmick, it's more for fun. Everyone has a cell phone, so they're just gonna do that. Nevertheless, it's sort of an oversight from Timex's part. They could have paid attention a little bit more to that and updated and changed the bezel to include the recent changes. Other than that, it has an acrylic crystal, a quartz movement, I think something like 30 or 50 meters of water resistance. So it's just one of these sort of cheaper reissue watches, and depending on your point of view, you could say, hey, I love it, or this is a money grab. It really depends on your preference for these reissues and your preference for the vintage watches. My opinion is just get the actual vintage watch. It's much cooler, and there's still a lot of them out there floating around. Back in the early days of this YouTube channel, I picked up quite a few different Timex watches at the flea market for about $5-10 Canadian dollars. Yeah, it would cost about $40-50 to service, but then for around 60 Canadian dollars, which is like $3 US, I'm kidding, it's about $30 US, you are getting a pretty cool watch and an actual piece of history, actual vintage timepiece, as opposed to something that kind of looks like a vintage timepiece. On the other hand, if you don't want to deal with the hassle of servicing vintage watches, hey, you could just buy one of these. It has a quartz movement, very reliable, very robust, and you can enjoy it and have that vintage look on your wrist without the risks of vintage watches. Thanks for watching this video all the way until the end. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss videos like this in the future, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know which out of all the releases is your favorite, is your least favorite. Just give me some feedback. I always enjoy reading your comments. Thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye.